Welcome to my series on thrifty textiles. This is a video about Shibori paper. For your equipment you're going to need newsprint, coloured food dyes, paper bowls, a clothespin, trays, water, rubber gloves and a table cover. I bought these food colourings from my local supermarket, and this is the cheapest way to do it. It's all 100% natural colour, all from spices and root vegetables. I've got my rubber gloves on because I don't want to stain my hands. And I have newsprint paper. I've got a plastic sheet on my tabletop, or you could use an opened up bin liner. I'm using newsprint, so I've got my papers ready. Preparation is very important when doing this. Have everything ready. A cheap baking tin, something you're not going to cook in. And I'm taking my dyes, all natural, just pour them into a paper bowl and put some water on top and swish it around. You could use a spoon to mix it with as well. And this is what you're going to do to be dipping your dyes in. So you're going to do that with all your colours. You need 4 little paper bowls. Hi guys, and welcome to my video about Shibori paper. I'm going to show you this technique. It's a Japanese technique of folding and dipping into a dye bath. So we're going to just do some very simple papers today. And I'm going to show you some simple folding techniques so you can make your own patterned paper. I've got just a household paper bowl, little bowl, and I'm going to soak my paper. I'm just going to soak the edge of the paper in some water. And the reason I want to do that is because I want it to soak up the dye really well. So if the paper is a little bit damp to start with, it actually helps the, just check that it's all wet inside. So you can see these are damp. It helps the dye to soak into the paper. So I'm just going to just wet that a little bit. And I'll tell you a little bit about the paper I'm using. It's very cheap newsprint. You don't need anything fancy, and the cheaper it is the better, because you want a paper that's really porous. And by porous I mean it's going to soak up the colour really well. So printer paper is not so good because it has like a finish on it. So anything that's got a very high shine finish on, it's not going to dye very well. So the cheaper the paper, the better. So that's one. I'm going to just put that aside. And I'm going to show you what else I have. I have my little dish of water, which I've just told you about that. So I'm going to put that aside. And I'm using these clothespins to be able to, we call them pegs in England. You call them pins in America. You can also use the bulldog clips. These are really good as well. And actually they're better because you can wash them. And I'm using just a regular household food dye. Next I'm going to show you how to fold your paper. I have a large sheet of paper here, but you can use smaller pieces and do the same thing. I'm folding the paper along the long side, and you want to make sure that when you fold it, and I have speeded this up so it looks like I'm working really fast. I don't really work this fast. I'm folding it in half, and then I'm folding one of the long ends up to where the fold is. So the outside edge to the fold. And again, the same way. You'll see my paper's a little bit wet. That doesn't really matter if you get a bit of water on there. I'm not going to be too precious about it. And make sure your folds are nice and crisp. And then I'm going to turn the corner up to match the side of the paper. You're creating little triangles and you're folding them back onto themselves. So you fold and turn and fold and turn. And you keep doing that until you have reached the top. And this is going to give you your little triangle fold that you saw me dipping in the paper in the water earlier. And there you have it, that easy. The next thing I'm going to show you is your stripes, your folds for your stripes. And I'm going to do the same again. I've got my fold and I'm going to turn the outer edge up to the fold. I'm going to do that on either side. And then I'm going to fold that outer edge up onto the fold again. And this time I'm going to turn my paper over because I'm going to make it like a fan. I'm going to concertina it. It's called a concertina, where you fold it back on itself, turn it and fold it, and turn it and fold it, and turn it and fold it, and turn it and fold it. And there you have it. You've got your little concertina. It's like a fan. And that you're going to dip, I'm going to dip each long side into the die to create some stripy paper. Very easy. There you have it. So put that aside. I'm going to clip that together, ready for dipping. And the thing about this process is you want to have everything prepped first. So have all your papers folded first and then do all of your dipping. So I've got my bowls organised. I've got my yellow, my red, my blue and my green. And I'm dipping that into the red colour. And you can see I've speeded up the video. I don't always work this fast. Just know that it's been speeded up to double time. I'm dipping into each colour. And you're going to see that when you dip your paper into the water first, before you put it into the die, you're going to get lighter colours coming out. And that will be quite evident with the finished papers that I show you at the end of this video. I'm going to show you how to fold for your rectangles, for your little square paper. You just fold it in 4, fold it back on itself, and then fold it in 3. Very simple, in thirds. Fold it up into thirds. And this one I'm going to dip dry. I'm not going to soak this first. Got some music coming out through there, I'm not sure what happened. So yellow, again you can see it's really, you can see it moving on the paper. It's quite interesting the way it kind of comes alive when you dip it. So I'm going from yellow to red to blue to green, and you're going to get those lovely blended colours where those dyes bleed into each other, and you're never really going to be very sure about what you get until you unfold it. So it's quite exciting, really. It's a voyage of discovery. So you've got that dipped in the blue. Turn your pin around each time, or your clip each time, so that you're not getting it all over your hands. And you can see on this one, we've got some lovely blending going on. You can see the colours already bleeding into each other. Rather nice. And I'm using a large metal tray for just storing my papers while they dry. With the striped paper, my bowl isn't really big enough, so I'm just folding it round so it fits in. And I'm just going to do red and blue on this one. So just folding it in so that it fits into the bowl, red and blue, and leave that to drain. The next one I'm going to do is my triangle. This is the one that I dipped into the water earlier. And this one is going to really soak up. And as I said, when you wet the paper first before you dye it, it's going to come out a lot paler than if you just do it dry. I wanted to do different effects to show you what happens, what's the difference between when you wet the paper first or when you dip it dry. So I'm going from red, blue and green. I'm going for stronger colours this time. And using the organic food dyes is a very safe way of doing it, especially if you are working with children. So I do recommend if you can find food dyes that are natural. Otherwise any food dyes are good because they're edible anyway. So I poured the green into my tray so I can get that long edge in there, and I dropped it. It doesn't matter, that's okay. That's all part of the fun. Don't be too precious about it. And I'm going to leave that on my big tray to dry. And the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do my triangle that I didn't wet. So this is the triangle that's dry, and we'll see what the difference is between these two different ones. And you want to just make sure that the dye has been picked up by all the edges of the paper, so just check that. I'm sort of fold that over a little bit to fit into the blue. And you only need to hold it in for a couple of seconds. It really is very, very fast, very effective, very fast technique. Now you can use fabric dyes for this, but they are a little bit harder work. You do get better colours with fabric dyes if you can afford to buy them. You can buy them ready mixed and do exactly the same thing. But do wear rubber gloves, please. So there you have it. There's my red, blue and green, and you can see the difference. You can see I've got little white bits left. I decided to use up the end bits of my dyes, so I mixed the red and yellow together to make an orange, and I mixed the red and blue together to make a purple. So I'm going to create some dyes, some stripes. I'm just having a little bit of a clean up. So do make sure that you've got a paper towel or a rag that you can use. Keep your area clean. I'm going to fold to make some stripes. So this is how you do it one more time. I'm doing it the short side this time. So you're folding it in half and then folding it up. Sorry, it went off screen a bit. You're doing the same concertina technique as we did earlier in the video. So follow the instructions for that. Concertina your stripes. And then we're going to dip them into these two leftover dye baths. And what's interesting about these is that they look like really bright colours, but you'll see at the end of the video when we start to unpack all of these papers, it's actually quite different to what you get when it's wet. What you need to understand, and there's my concertina paper, any colours, paints or dyes are always darker when they're wet and they dry out a lot lighter. So if you're not sure what colour you're going to get, you could do some test strips and then dry them with a hairdryer to see what colours you get when they're dry, because they are very different. I'm just using my fingers for this because this is just a last little test. Just dipping the sides in there, and I'm going to leave those to drain. So use up all your dyes. You can mix them together. Just like any paints, you can make other colours with them. You can mix a red and green and make a brown. You can make different types of blues by adding the greens and blues together. And the more water you have in your dye bath, the lighter the colour is going to be. So there you have it. That's my little experiment. That's how messy it is. So you do really need to wear rubber gloves. So there's my papers waiting. Here's one I did earlier, which was just a rectangular fold and dipped into one single colour. And I think you'll agree that's very effective. I wanted to show you how effective it is just using one single colour. And then you could print into the middles, the white parts, if you wanted to. The next one I'm going to show you is the stripe. It's a little bit wet, so I've got some paper towel underneath it. If it's very wet, be very careful when you unfold it because it's quite delicate and you don't want to tear it. So just start off at one end and just very carefully unfold it, and it's really nice. And what I love about this technique is that you never really know what you're going to get until you unfold it. And you can see that's very wet. I'm going to leave it on the paper towel to drain, and that's number 2, our Shibori stripes. Again, that would make a great ground for either as it is, or it would make a lovely background for printing on. Here's my triangle dip, and this is the one that was dipped when it was wet. So I dipped it in water first, and then I dipped it into the dye. And you can see how pretty it is when you start to unfold it. This was the one which we folded triangles. We kind of fold and turn, fold and turn. And this is a big piece of paper, so the bigger the paper, the more delicate it is, and the more careful you have to be when you unfold it. So do wear gloves. This is still wet. I didn't want to leave it to dry for too long because they can stick together when they dry. It will kind of mold together. So excuse the headshot. Sorry about that, guys. And you want to be very careful, find one end. Once you find the one end, it should be a bit easier, but look how dramatic that is. It really is very interesting when you start to unfold it, because you really don't know what you're going to get until you do that. You can see how the blues and greens have blended, the red has made a stripe, the blues and greens have made a cross shape. Very interesting. So I had a little bit of difficulty finding the outside edge for this one, and like I said, you do need to be very careful to make sure that you do it very slowly. This is where you need lots of patience. I've always said that textile designers have a huge amount of patience because of situations like this where you do have to be very, very careful. Just trying to find the end of the paper, and I'm taking my gloves off. I can't feel it through the rubber gloves, so I'm just going to do it with my bare hands. Yeah, this one was a little bit tricky because it was already starting to stick together. So there you have it, that's it, I found it. And then very gently peel it apart. Very, very carefully. And you can see what a really pretty pattern that's made. It's really gorgeous. And I've got one more, I think one more side to unfold. So you can see how it's almost created a patchwork effect. You've got the squares and the cross shapes created by the colours and the way it's been folded. So put that one aside to dry. And then this was the paper that I scrunched up, and I just kind of squeezed the dye into the paper. You get this lovely, almost like a batik kind of veiny effect, and that can be rather nice. It's not shibori, but I thought I would just throw that one in there for you. Super easy. The next one I'm going to show you is going to be the rectangle, and again this was the one that I dyed wet. I dipped it wet. I did two. I did one with the paper wet and one with the paper dry, and you'll see when they are dry how different they are. Again, you're being very gentle, very careful unfolding it, so you don't want it to tear. So there's another big piece of paper. I did a large size one for that. This was an A2 sketchbook that I used, Newsprint sketchbook. And again, just be very careful to peel it apart. And again, that's lovely, really beautiful colours. Next I'm going to take the stripes, and we are going to unfold that very carefully, and you'll see that it's actually easier to unfold the smaller paper than it is the big paper. I was hoping to get a bit more of the white showing, but I didn't. I actually all blended into each other, but that's fine. This is the triangle that was dipped dry, and it's not quite as soaking wet as the other one, so it should be a little bit easier to unfold. And again, you know, you want to be very careful unfolding it. You don't want to tear it. You can see that was a bit easier than the one before because it's not as soaking wet. Lovely, lovely pattern. You can see how the dyes blend into each other, the colours blend into each other, and you've got that lovely kind of almost like an ink spot flower created by the white paper where it didn't pick up the dye. And if you do this with fabric, it's even more fantastic. And I will do a video where I will show you how to do shibori fabric. For now, I'm going to show you this one. And this was the rectangle that we dyed wet. And this one is very wet. So I'm going to just show you unfolding it. You just be very careful because it is very... the paper soaks together, so it's kind of almost stuck together. So just very carefully unfolding it. And you can already see this was my red, blue and green. And you can see how the colours have blended in nicely together. Really beautiful. And you can do anything you like with these once they're dry. You could draw into them, you can print onto them, you can even stitch into them. And just you can see how careful I'm being peeling it apart. And that is rather lovely. A rather lovely patterned paper. And like I said, you know, be careful because they will dry a lot lighter than when they're wet. So welcome back, guys. Here's the finished results. So this one is the single colour fold with the rectangles, so you can see that's quite effective. Then we have this little one which we folded also into squares, and this one you can see how the colours have blended really nicely and produced different colours. So you've got the orange, you've got these greens and blues here, and this is really pretty. So that's another successful one. Then we have our stripes. The stripes came out really well. I'm quite pleased with those ones. I was hoping to get a little bit of white on there, but you can just about see a little bit of our almost like a hazy shadow here of the white. And then we had this one which we dipped into different colours. This was supposed to be orange, so it's dried. It's actually interesting because it's dried more yellow, and then the purple's actually dried more pink. So this is where you never know what you're going to end up with until you actually dry them out. So that was another striking one. And this is one of the big ones. This was the triangle one. You can see the triangles here, and you can see how you get that kind of like diffused effect on the paper. So, and that, again, another successful one. Really nice, and it's quite nice how it's created this almost like a patchwork square effect. Very interesting. This one was the one that we did with the big paper. We folded it into rectangles, and we actually wet the paper first before we dipped it into the dye. So you can see it's come out really pale, almost like a pastel. Well, they are pastel colours, but you can still see how the colours have blended into each other. And again, that's rather nice. And then this one again, this is a triangle one. This one was the triangle that we didn't wet before we dyed. So you've got white, you've got the little white bits showing. So again, the colours came out really well. It's really interesting how what's happened with the blue and the green where it's blended here. It makes that kind of cross design. So all in all, a successful little project, and just encouraging you to have lots of fun with it, experiment, and be safe. And thank you for watching. I look forward to watching my next video to see what I do with these papers. Mm-hmm.